Good morning, good afternoon, and good night to everyone. Welcome back to the K Plus podcast. Hope you guys are having an excellent day today. My day is going quite fine so far. I'm gonna get straight into it. I have another special guest for you guys. We're gonna have a great conversation today. We're gonna talk a little finance, talk a little, talk a little bit about home ownership and so forth. Today I have with me the financial expert, in all of her expertise and wisdom, Miss JC. JC, talk to me. How you doing today?
Good morning. I'm doing good. So I'm really excited to be on the podcast. I know a lot about home ownership. I bought my first home at the age of 21. Used it as a rental property. I have a degree in accounting, so definitely excited to talk about financials because that's basically a passion of mine.
Owning a home at 21 is an excellent feat, and I applaud that highly. I really applaud that highly. I think, personally, a lot of us, many of us, want to be homeowners at some point of our lives, whether it's buying land or purchasing a home upright and so forth. All of us, I myself, want to be a homeowner. I working towards that feat and so forth, just making sure the money's right, everything credit, gotta make sure everything all that is set and so forth. And I really wanted your expertise here with us and so forth. I love a lot of your financial principles and so forth. She runs Small Woman Big Wallet. I said that correctly, Small Woman Big Wallet on Facebook.
Yeah, that's
Yeah,
correct.
she runs. I was looking at it. I don't know much about investing. I don't know much about investing. I trying to get into it this year a little bit, just a little bit, just try to make sure increase the money as best as we can as possible. But like I said, a lot of us really strive to become homeowners at one point of our lives. That's the quote unquote American dream, as we call it, and so forth. But in this economy now, with inflation, cost of living getting higher, and so forth, a lot of people may not really see that as attainable still. People thinking they're going to be renters for the rest of their lives. I mean, if you choose to do that, I guess that's cool, but people not really seeing that it's attainable to become homeowners. What's your take on that in today's
Um,
world?
so I will admit it is very difficult. I feel even when I bought a house, it was easier, and that was just like practically a couple years ago. I do believe it's still attainable though. You just have to kind of get creative with it. So, I mean, once you have a job and you've had a steady job for 2 years, that already makes it easier. Building up your credit, having good credit, that will make it significantly easier. But what do I mean by getting creative? Um, More than likely in this economy, it would be very difficult to do 20% down, even 10% down. But now we have a lot of 3.5% down options, and there's even some 1% down options that we have. The drawback of that is that if you end up paying a lower down payment, your monthly payment will more than likely be higher because you'll have like PMI, which is like private
Yes.
mortgage insurance. Yeah. So that's like the drawback because like yes, you're putting less down, but your monthly payment is gonna probably be more until you hit about like 20% in equity for the property. So that is a drawback, but that is one of the ways I'll make property more attainable. You could also get like USDA loans. Those also have tons of like low down payment programs that way, that make it easier to get a house. But you have to try to basically get creative because it's not easy. Even with interest rates getting down, it seems like the prices for houses are like increasing. Because I've noticed that even in my area, interest rates going down. I'm like, let's see if I can pick up a property, right? But when you look at it now, they're increasing the property prices by $2,000, $5,000 because they're like, okay, more people are going to try now that interest rates are lower. So I'm like,
So let's jack
I'm
up the
still gonna
prices,
end up,
huh?
so I'm still gonna end up paying the same amount of money essentially. So I'm like, okay, not worth it. So it's kind of like we're in a game where we're trying to see when not only the interest rates are gonna go down, but when also the prices of housing are either gonna stay down or go down instead of increasing.
And you did mention in terms of the down payment options and so forth, 20% is quote unquote the gold standard, but like ain't everybody have 60 G's up front to put down for I think a $300,000 house. It's a lot of bread, so it's a
Yeah.
drawback. It's like pick your poison. So you get the 20% down, you put on the 60 G's or whatever, for the house, but then that's a lot of money to have. Closing costs is involved. But then you
Mm-hmm.
put on lower down payment, less cash to put down, but then your monthly payment could be a little higher. So I guess try to navigate to see which one would work better for you and so forth. Most people probably pick the 3 to 5% option because less money up front, so
Yep.
and so forth. So most people would probably pick that option. And I looked up some numbers here. Like per bank rate, the average 30-year mortgage rate based on as of like since December 2024 is about 6.84%. It's a little steep, but it was, I
Yeah.
believe it was a little higher, like in a 2023 span, if I'm not mistaken. I think it was a
Yeah.
little higher than that.
It
So
was
it
seven
dipped to
percent at
that
one point. Mm-hmm.
7%. That's a lot of percent, and so forth. So now it's going down a bit and so forth. So trying to navigate that and so forth to see. So there's 30 years mortgages, 15-year mortgages. As far as I'm concerned, most people, pick the 30-year mortgages. Is there do you recommend, or is a 15-year mortgage, is that even like possible to be able to pay that off so quickly unless you make a certain amount of income?
So my recommendation is to always get the 30 year, just because I'm looking at your overall financial situation, and the 30 year is always more affordable than the 15 year for same house, just because you have double the time to pay off the house. So the reason why I recommend that is because you're less likely to end up in foreclosure, because it's a
Mm,
payment that's easier to manage. If your job cuts your salary, if you get laid off and you don't work for 6 months, your money can stretch a lot further when you have a lower monthly mortgage payment. And then you also could just pay it off early. So if you wanted to pay it in 15 years, having a 30-year mortgage doesn't stop you from paying it off
mm,
in 15 years. So if you know you could have afford the 15-year mortgage amount while you have that good job, pay it down like you're trying to pay it in 15 years. And if something happens and you don't have the good job anymore, well, maybe instead of 15, you're paying it in 18 years because you had, 1 or 2 years where your job paid less.
mm,
So it's just the 30 year gives you a lot more financial flexibility, which is important because an issue I see when people buy houses is that they assume the financial situation that they are currently in is the financial situation that they will always be in.
mm,
And that's not the reality. Because you make 150K today doesn't mean next year or even in the next 2 years or next 5 or 10 years, because this is a 30-year mortgage. That's a long time
mm-hmm.
that you're
Yep.
going to be still making that 150K. So you want to make sure that you're doing it on an income that, one, you can consistently make.
Yes.
Even in the worst economy, this is the salary that I can still get. And you want to make sure that if you're a couple, if you're married, you want to make sure that whatever the mortgage is, it's you're able to sustain it on one salary. That way, if one of you get fired or laid off, you're not immediately putting such a strain on your family or your
So
marriage.
don't make the choice based on like two of us. Like if one person make the choice based on if one person could afford it by themselves. God forbid someone lose the job or pass.
Yes, that would be my recommendation, because you don't want to end up in a situation like you said, a spouse passed. Now you have to move out of the house or sell it, or you're on foreclosure and you still have your kids. You just kind of don't want to end up in that situation. And yes, it sucks. You can't get the luxury mansion you might want, but can you still have space and a house over your head for your family? Yes. If someone's laid off, fired, or died, can you still afford your housing? Yes. Can you still afford to feed your kids? Yes. So to me, it just makes more sense, because what protects you the most in the long run, especially when you have a family, it's really important to think about not necessarily getting the biggest or the best, but what can you sustain, and how can you constantly provide the necessities without literally like killing yourself.
Yeah.
And people tend to there's a lot of overconsumption in America, and I think that's what kind of leads them to like getting things that you may not necessarily need just because it's like bigger or better, and it
Yes.
exceeds your necessities and even your wants to an extent.
Absolutely, I agree with that. A lot of us, everybody want the big house, and my uncle will always tell me, "Hey, big house equal big problems." Check what he's saying. So like,
Yeah.
so that comes with it too, and it's like, yeah, a lot of people would like the bigger house, but then there's what you really need. Family
Mm-hmm.
of you, man, wife, 2 kids. You don't need a 5 bedroom house.
Yep.
Yes, yes, you want people to come over, have a spot to sleep in and so forth, but you gotta do what you can manage at least in the time that you're in now. Understand what I'm
Mm-hmm.
saying? So it comes with that. I don't want no big house. I just wanna. We got regular house, look pretty, regular house. Me, cause I don't need to. I don't wanna have to fix AC for the whole 2 story, 3 story house and all that and so
Yeah,
forth.
the costs add up a lot. People tend to forget about the additional the cost of like buying houses, because that's one of the major advantages of renting is that some of the financial burden of a roof breaking down, a water heater bursting, like those aren't your responsibility when you're a tenant, but when you own the property, everything is your responsibility unless it's like a
Mm-hmm.
condo or a townhome where they cover the external expenses. um Nah, it's all yours. So you just have to figure it out. So definitely try to make sure you have a good cushion when you buy a house because it can get really bad really quickly if you're not careful.
Mm-hmm. That same thing. Gotta stock a lot of bread. Like say, AC may break. My AC break right now, right on the landlord's door. Hey,
Mm-hmm.
hello. Hey, you gonna come fix this now? Cause I pay the rent. This is your job. But when you own the home, you gotta pay that. And AC ain't cheap.
Mm-hmm.
AC stuff ain't cheap and so forth. So even while I was aside from that, I was looking even last night doing a little research on average home prices. I live in Tampa. Um, right now it's about 375,000 plus. That's the average pricing and so forth. I've got some other numbers here. Los Angeles 952,000. I don't know. People live.
Yeah, it's
California's for the
expensive.
rich.
Yeah.
California's for the rich. I'm sorry. I don't know how y'all do it. I don't know. Like that's $1 million. That's average. I can't do that right now. Even if I was rich, I wasn't going, and so
Yeah.
forth.
That's a
So,
lot.
cost of living, and it's like we people like to look at averages a lot, but just because this is the average doesn't mean you can't find cheaper. You could find cheaper. You could find more affordable, maybe a townhouse and so forth, and all those other things. Multiple options. Multiple
Mm-hmm.
options. So even in the housing realm, a lot of people like to talk about housing market crashes, which is essentially, guys, when there's a lack of demand for houses or an excess of available ones. I looked that up, by the way, because I didn't know that fully and so forth. So I understand you wait for the market to crash, which means not enough people buying houses, so the seller's going to drop the prices dramatically. So I want to know, is that a good strategy for people to rely on, wait to for the market to crash essentially to buy said house?
If that's a good strategy. Um, I think preparing uh I think basically trying to assume that something is going to crash is not maybe the best way to live your life because
Yes.
you're basically waiting on something that may never happen. It could happen, but it may never happen. And also, when it happens, you don't know. It could happen 10 years from now, 20 years from now, 2 years from now, 1 year from now.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so I think usually when people refer to housing market crashes, they're thinking like the 2008 housing market crash. And that
Mm-hmm.
is not happening again, if we're being honest. What people are talking about probably will not even be a real housing market crash. Maybe you could say maybe more of a housing recession could be the assumption, but a
Okay.
hard housing market crash like what happened kind of between 2007 to 2009 is very, very unlikely to happen. Um, I would say that just be smart, you know,
Mm-hmm.
monitor things, make sure you have your money saved so that whenever a good moment comes, you are able to buy the properties and things you want. Um, don't try to always necessarily find the lowest because you could wait for interest rates to drop down to 3%. They may never get that low again, but even by the time you wait for it to drop 3%, now the houses might be worth 10% more. So you kind of just have to be really observant. You have to decide what level of risk you're willing to take. Like, am I willing to take this 5% interest loan because, you know, I'm assuming that hopefully the housing price will be less than if I wait for it to get 3%. And also, since you waited 3%, like that might take 3 years. So now you're losing out on a lot of housing because you just
Mm-hmm.
waited for this 3% to hit. So I think it's bad to kind of make decisions with assumptions of crashes. Like, even when you're investing in the stock market, don't invest with the intent of oh, let me wait till the the stock market crashes to invest.
Mm-hmm.
You have to weigh your risk, you dollar cost average. So I'd say kind of apply the same thing for housing. uh I think within my feelings are that within 2026, that'd be a good time. Like even now, later in 2025, if you want to buy a house, do that.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, you could also refinance. That's why interest rates shouldn't be necessarily the make or break for you.
Mm-hmm.
If you know you can manage the amount that your house is on a month to month basis, if the interest rate does go down and you've had the loan for over a year on a lot of properties, on most properties, you can refinance, which means now you get the benefit of the lower interest rate anyways. Like you might have to pay additional like fees or down payment, but you'll still get that interest rate you want. And it will be at the same house price that your house was worth versus whatever new higher house price it might be with the interest rate lower. So that's what I'd say. Like don't ever make financial decisions on the assumption of a crash. I think it makes a lot of people make like very bad decisions. Like if you think the stock market's going to crash, you might end up
Mm-hmm.
selling all your stocks and it might go up 20%. It's not very wise to do that. So just monitor, observe, know your market, know your area, look at
Yes.
the trends, right? And then decide when you want to move. If it's 5.5%, then you do that. If it's 6%, then you do that, right? Um, but don't just decide that some arbitrary magical number will be the number for you. You have to kind of learn your area. And to do that, like I said, you need to look at trends, look at the market, study it, and then you'll kind of see. That's how I know, even though the interest rates are going down, housing prices are going up. So it's because I've been monitoring it, I've been looking at it, I see trends. So that gives me an idea of, okay, if it goes down to 3%, more than likely I could assume that the housing prices are going to even be higher. Or whatever's worth 260 now
Mm-hmm.
might be 300, 320 when the interest rate is 3% because I'm already monitoring my area and looking at trends. So that'd be my recommendation more than assuming crashes because, um, I'm not able to predict the future. No one really is. So,
Mm-hmm.
anyone who tells you it will crash in a certain year, don't ever listen to people like that. That's just my honest opinion. Because like you literally cannot tell the future, so there's no way to anticipate what will happen. The most you can do is try to analyze trends, and that might give you
Mm-hmm.
an idea of it. But that's not 100% guaranteed at any point.
I agree. I definitely agree because the thing with waiting for crashes is if everybody and their mother is waiting for the housing market to crash, and if and when it does crash, then everybody is going to be buying
Flooding the
houses at
market.
the same time. It's
Yep.
a free for all.
Yep.
Everybody's fighting for it. Everybody, we're wait for the crash, wait for the crash, wait for the crash. Everyone's waiting, and it's like okay, what was 400K is now what 250 or some crazy number. So now the options, the amount of buyers that are trying to buy this house is increasing. So
Mm-hmm.
it's like you got to fight for it now, and then you waited all this time, and now you might end up with no house because it's done bought.
Yep.
So that in regards to that, I do agree. You shouldn't really wait. Really and truly, just if you could afford it, go get it. Don't wait for a specific thing that might or might not happen, as you have mentioned and alluded to. So yeah, I be seeing on YouTube with the people with the videos with the fire behind them and a house burning down, housing market crash. Like
Yeah.
you can't rely on that because, like you said, you can't tell the future and so forth. So that wouldn't be the best method and so forth, as I have seen. So aside from that, both of us, we came up from the Virgin Islands, transitioned to the States and so forth. So I think that to me, it seems like there's a difference with like getting a home up here, then back home. Back home we come from a smaller territory, may not have as much options and so forth in terms of housing. So how was that? I don't know if you have any if you dealt with trying to get a home back home or property and so forth. How was it back home as opposed to up here in the States?
Yeah. I actually did try to get a property, but it's harder when you don't live there like actively at the moment. So that's what kind of made it more difficult for me to acquire it. Yes, there's a lot less options, a lot less lenders, a lot less loan types. But I feel like also it has a lot of potential. I
Okay.
think that honestly, when you're in the Virgin Islands, it might be harder to acquire property in the Virgin Islands, but I feel like when you're outside of it, Because if you think about it, I could pay 350K for a house, and it's just in some random suburbia. Then I could
Mm-hmm.
buy a house in the Virgin Islands for 350K, and it's probably within 20, maybe 30 minutes max of a beach, you know?
Mm-hmm.
Um, and that's kind of something that we're so used to when you live in the Virgin Islands and that you're from the Virgin Islands, that we're like, hey, it's so overpriced, but people are paying like the same thing for things that have like maybe like less value in terms of like view and what you can
Mm-hmm.
get and tourism and things like that. But at the same time, you have to look at it as also like, what is the average Virgin Islander making compared to
Mm-hmm.
somebody on the state side, and that also is what may make it a lot harder for them to acquire those properties. um so what would I say? I feel like if you live in the Virgin Islands, one, you have to be more open to renovating or building your own. I
Mm-hmm.
don't think it's as easy to buy properties, especially newer construction properties, as in the States. You're, like I
Okay.
said, you're limited on lenders, you're limited on loan types, so you have to be open to either maybe renovating something, which
Like a
I
fixer
feel.
upper per se.
Yes, a fixer upper, exactly. Or maybe buying a piece of land and building it on your own. I think that's a very good way if you're a young Virgin Islander and you don't want to renovate a house. I think that's a good way for you to get started on a house, is to actually just buy a plot of land, and as you get money, you start putting your checks towards the house. You won't be able to build the house all at once. It might take 2 years, but you'll build it, and it's
Mm-hmm.
essentially done whenever you're finished, and it's at your own pace, so you're not really going into as much debt. And then you also just own the land right out, and you could tailor the house how you'd like it to. So I think that'd be a good way to go, rather than maybe trying to buy something that was built new construction, because I don't think the pricing would be very good in the Virgin Islands from what I've seen for new construction. And then
Mm-hmm.
renovating, depending on how old the house is or what area it is in, it can get really, really pricey. So that'd be my recommendation. The Virgin Islands still does have like FHA loans and other like
Mm-hmm.
federal types of loans, but like I said, limited lenders. So you can still get properties there, but that is definitely a place where I'd say you'd have to be more creative. I wish we had more lending options too, because I feel
Mm-hmm.
like that would help a lot more people. Because if I wanted to buy a house 1% down in the States, even 0% down, I can. In the Virgin Islands, it's not really a possibility. You really are more likely to have to put 10 to 20% down.
Mm-hmm.
Because I think even for the FHA loans for them, it was like a little trickier than when I did it in the States. So yeah, I mean, you gotta get creative, man. It's gonna be harder, but like the Virgin Islands is worth it, especially if you live there and you enjoy it. Make the investment. Buy a plot of
Mm-hmm.
land, build on it, tailor it to how you want it to be. Matter of fact, if you build a house, try to make it a house where it could be versatile enough to be an investment property. Would be my recommendation, because renting on St. Croix is very profitable. I'm
Mm-hmm.
sure the rest of the Virgin Islands is like that. St. Thomas is very popular. Airbnb on them are also very popular.
Mm-hmm.
I know
Yep.
people that Airbnb on St. Croix. I've seen prices for Airbnbs on St. Thomas. So that's also a way. So if you're willing to do it, do something like maybe a duplex where you could live in one section, rent out the second section. It'll probably cost you as much as building it as a single family home, honestly. So why not do it? It might make
Mm-hmm.
your square footage for your area a little smaller, but you could also pay off your house faster, have a separate area for guests if you want to, and make extra money so that your work can become more optional. But that'd be my recommendation. It is harder, but it's not impossible. You just have to be willing to work hard for it and be willing to kind of get
Absolutely.
creative, take some risk. Yeah.
So, when it comes to the cost of purchasing a home, would you say it's more expensive to buy a home in the Virgin Islands than in the States, excluding California and New York? Just take them off the list. Like, us, like let's say Florida and Georgia. Is it is it more expensive to buy a home in the VI as opposed to like Florida or Georgia, Carolinas, Texas?
No, not really. No. I feel like you could get a lot more bang for your buck,
Mm-hmm.
because I look at properties on the Virgin Islands all the time, especially since in terms of like investment properties, and
Mm-hmm.
uh it's technically a lot more affordable in the Virgin Islands, even probably per square footage. Especially when you think about how you could market it and use it. Because if I buy a property here, it could basically only be a rental property in America.
Mm-hmm.
There's very few that you could Airbnb and it actually makes sense because it's not necessarily a tourist area or tourist attraction. But in the Virgin
Mm-hmm.
Islands, no matter where you have your house, it could essentially be Airbnb, rentaled,
Mm-hmm.
and used as a tourist attraction because like I said, the islands they're very small. A beach is technically always within like driving distance, and
Yep.
you can't really get that most places in America. And if you do think about it, Florida, the Carolinas, anything that's close to the shoreline, California, like we can exclude
Mm-hmm.
it, but part of the reason why it's expensive is because of the shoreline.
Yes.
Um, the areas that have beaches are automatically way more expensive than basically the rest of the state. So in St. Croix, you basically get not technically, not literally beachfront prices, but very close to beachfront views for random suburbia rural prices in a lot of America. So I'd actually say it's more affordable in the Virgin Islands, but uh, it's probably less affordable for a local because of the whole cost of living and
Mm-hmm.
the wages. So I'm not going to say, hey, because the houses are more affordable, that it's more attainable for a Virgin Islander because
Mm-hmm.
that's not necessarily true. I feel like it's still as difficult or maybe even more difficult for Virgin Islanders to attain housing than in the States just because cost of living is high. We all know that.
Mm-hmm.
Wages are essentially stagnant and aren't very high. So even if the housing is more affordable than a lot of states, because of those factors and because of the limited lenders, which means limited interest rates, limited loan options, those also make it very difficult.
Okay, okay, I got you on that. One day it'll be nice. I ponder the thought sometimes, buying land back home one day. What I want to buy a house up here, maybe move back one day and get some land back home. Cause home is home. I do love home and so forth. So I always think about that. A lot of people buying land and building a house is very popular, as you've explained and so forth. Even by where my moms live, I mean, there's always some new house building up in the hill. Always some new house building. Always some construction. Big, big, big stupid house, man. Big house, small house, all type of house building and so forth. So it's very popular to do that back home. So I just really wanted to like get that aspect of it because I do feel and it does look like buying land and building it is just more popular than buying a house straight up. Even when sometimes I surfing the web. I go on Zillow type houses in USVI St. Croix, and it's like I never really see a new house on. There's always an older house,
Yep.
older, not as modern and so forth. I mean, house is a house. Wherever floats your boat, that's fine. I don't really see that, so it's interesting. That's why I asked if buying a house back home was cheaper and so forth. Because I don't know, I had this notion that it was per se. I don't know why, but just seeing the house prices up here and so forth. But then again, states have 60,000 billion more options than back home and so forth. Even Housing Finance Authority back home, I think VI HFA, VI Housing Finance Authority, they have like a first time home buyer program. I think that's probably an option people can use and so forth to help them get their first property, land and so forth. So that's also a thing. You guys could check that out and so forth. But yeah, that's the goal for me one day. Buy some land back home. I want a piece of home before everybody comes and buy it out. Just save a piece for me, guys. I'm coming. Save a piece for me. Save a piece. Give me a quarter acre, 0.15. Just save me a piece. That's all I ask for, okay? That's all I ask for. So we've talked about housing market crashes and is buying a house still attainable. So it is frankly it is, even though people may say it's not essentially. So what are the steps people, especially of our age group, 20s, 30s, what's the steps we can take to buy a house? What's a good plan to get that first home?
A good plan. So, a good plan for basically buying a home is you'll want to start cleaning up your credit. You don't have to have credit that's crazy amazing, but at least try to get it in the 600s. That'll open up a lot of options for you. Get it above maybe like 620. That should be like the minimum you'd want it at to be able to purchase a house. Because there are some like low down payment programs and government programs that'll give you uh, a loan with a 620 credit score. Some even 580, but that's a bit too low. You're definitely
Mm-hmm.
gonna limit your options and pay a lot more. What else? Then after that, I'd say you work on your credit score. That'll take at least a year, maybe two. It depends on how bad it is. If
Mm-hmm.
it's good, then you don't really have to worry about that. If it's good, then the next thing you can worry about is basically getting that work history. Because when you're really young, especially like you said, kind of like if you're in your 20s,
Mm-hmm.
you need at least 2 years of tax returns and 2 years of work history. If you're super young, just finished college, they're gonna want your transcripts. Because since I bought a house at 21, I didn't even have 2 years of full work history.
Mm-hmm.
So I had to end up giving transcripts of college, and they'll use that in place. I'm not sure what exactly they're looking for in your transcripts. I don't know if you have to be an A student.
Good
They
grades, man. Good
never
grades.
Yeah, they never necessarily explain, but you do have to send them at least your
Mm-hmm.
transcript for those 2 years. And then make sure you have all your tax documents in place and together. You're going to need your tax returns for like at least the last 2 years. Do not move money around. Make sure that if you move money around, it's way before you even apply for the loan.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, because what's going to happen is if you move money around anywhere within like maybe 30 to 90 days of when you applied for the loan, it's going to give you a lot of issues. You're going to have to send back a lot more paperwork. You're going to have to answer more questions. You might have to
Forgive me. When you said moving money around, you mean like explain
transfer
that a little.
between bank accounts. So
Mm-hmm.
let's say you have a Navy Federal bank account and then maybe Banco Popular bank account. Uh, if you're using your Banco Popular account for the down payment of the home, do not
Mm-hmm.
transfer money from the Navy Fed into the Banco Popular. It will flag things. You'll have to answer more questions. You'll have to submit more paperwork. So it creates more issues.
Mm-hmm.
Don't get
Okay.
a new car. Don't get any new loans. All of that
Mm-hmm.
is going to flag more paperwork, more issues. Your debt to income ratio is a lot higher now. So you might have to get your loan cut down because the bank is
Mm-hmm.
like, your debt to income ratio is higher now. So your loan's going to be less. So now instead of affording that 275K house, you're gonna have to get 200 and maybe 50K, 225K. So you have to have your accounts and your finances in orders. You have to have your taxes in orders. You have to have steady and consistent work history, and
Mm-hmm.
you just have to have all those things together and your credit score together. Once you have those things, it'll make it a lot easier. You'll need a good realtor. Um, to help you through the process, but those are the
Mm-hmm.
main things you're going to need to be able to get a property.
Already. And a lot of money. A lot. Don't forget the cash. You need that cash money. You need that cash money. JC, your expertise has blessed this show. I really appreciate you coming on here with us and speaking to us about home ownership and the ramifications of it and so forth. Sorry,
Mm-hmm.
I'm a night guy. Daytime doesn't work with me, but really appreciate it. You spread a lot of knowledge here. I appreciate it. I know the people will appreciate it as well. You're very well versed in it and so forth. Once again, you bought it first house at 21. I salute you. Absolutely. That's an excellent feat that I applaud highly and so forth. That's some real good stuff. Motivating for me. Maybe I could get one before 30. Maybe not. But I will get one day and so forth. And hope you guys, can take this knowledge, use it, apply it to your life, spread it, share it, and so forth. And we really appreciate your expertise and so forth.
All right. Thank you.
Guys, thank you guys for tuning in. Thank you guys for watching. Stay tuned for more content. K Plus Podcast, we out. Peace.